Enemy dead ahead. Migi no Teki. Enemy to the right. Hidari no Teki. Enemy to the left. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Royal Army. My name is Iaido through a kata. You're always encouraged to begin by relaxing your body completely, mentally, and physically. Now, of course, you wouldn't be able to do this in a real fight, but the idea of training you to do it is so that you will panic less in a real fight. Hopefully, not panic at all, but all your attention can be on engaging the other person. So you relax. Then imagine that you see your enemy coming forward towards you, and you bring your left hand up onto the guard and the scabbard of the sword. 4 fingers around the scabbard, your thumb curled over the guard. And this too is a very important part of Japanese sword etiquette, because this is a position that a samurai would carry his sword in when he wasn't absolutely sure that he was safe. Now, I'm sure you're a lovely audience. You probably won't be surprised to hear we get some real loonies in this place sometimes, especially when they find they can get their hands on swords and guns and play with them. So I have to be a bit careful sometimes. So if I was walking around here now, and this sort of happened to me a few years back, if I was walking around here now, and somebody suddenly leapt up and said, "Come on, Keith, give us a look at your sword." With my thumb over the top of the guard now, that person can't pull the sword out of the scabbard, and they can't pull the sword and the scabbard out of the obi, the sash that goes around my waist. So that's why it's very important. But once you get to here, then the draw and the cut are going to come very fast. Several things happen in quick succession. First of all, you slide forwards with your right leg, close the distance. Very little running away in Japanese sword fighting. It's mostly about piling in and overpowering the opponent. So your right leg comes forwards at the same time as your left hand puts a bit of downward pressure on the sword and feeds it into the upcoming right hand. So we get this. What also happens is that the thumb here on the left hand slides off the guard and winds up on a point just behind it. And this is also important because you see the Japanese sword is designed to stay stuck in the scabbard. So if I lean over, the sword doesn't fall out. It's a safety measure. And that's achieved by having a brass collar called a habaki mounted at the base of the blade. Now the problem is sometimes the habaki gets jammed really tightly in the scabbard, and then you risk the unfortunate and possibly deadly spectacle of seeing a samurai stepping forward going and the sword doesn't come out of the scabbard. So the point of having the thumb here is so that you can push the sword clear of the scabbard as a prelude to the draw. So, onto the draw and cut. So when we get to here, we're already beginning our draw, and in Japanese swordsmanship you're almost always taught to push forward with the sword as far as you can. When you can't push it any further, then you pull back on the scabbard. And at a certain point, the sword and the scabbard part, and either just before that in some schools where they're very particular, or as soon as you've parted the one from the other, you begin your attack in whatever line you wish to cut. Now this is where the real danger point comes, because you've got to make sure that you are pushing forward and drawing back on the same plane. You always have to think about the back of the sword being in contact, no matter what position the scabbard's in, with the back of the scabbard. Because if you draw the sword in one plane but yank the scabbard back in the other, again, the razor sharp edge can cut through the scabbard and seriously injure your left hand. So when you get to here, you have to think, push, pull and cut. Yes, they're two distinct motions, even though it looks like they're one. So what have we done at the end of our cut? Possibly several things. I may have beaten my opponent's weapon aside. I may have sliced their sword arm. I may have sliced their body if their sword arm is still in the air. Or I may have missed. Now if I miss and do what I just did and allow my sword to go flying out of line, I'm dead. Because the other guy is going to go, thank you very much. Step in and finish me off. So what I need to do is make sure that at the end of the cut, the sword is still pointed forwards. It's still a danger to that person and a disincentive for them to move forwards. Because then I've got the chance of moving in. So, all that is one waza. Nukitsuki takes us all the way to the end of the first cut. So from here now we can begin our second waza, which is kiryoshi. So kiryoshi is a follow-up cut if the first one doesn't entirely finish the job. So what you do is step in under the safety of your sword, whip the sword round to attack a second time as your foot hits the ground, make that second cut and finish your opponent off. So hopefully your opponent now is a heap of unmoving whatever on the floor, and the first thing you do after that second cut is to come up into the mid-level guard, chudan. Because you don't know, there might not be other attackers coming at you. And if your sword's in this position, you can attack or defend to the right, to the left, behind you, if you sense there's danger there. And if this fella starts to twitch here, well that's easy, because you can finish them off in any number of ways. But let's assume that they're not twitching and we don't see any sign of anyone else coming out to attack us. We might want to put the sword away. Now we have a slightly different problem. I've just whacked this poor devil once, maybe twice, with my razor-sharp katana, and it's all covered now in a sticky mess that I will euphemistically call raspberry jam. And if we don't clean the raspberry jam off the sword, and we shove the sword straight back in the scabbard, what's going to happen? The sword's going to get glued in the scabbard, and we may not be able to draw it if we get attacked a little way further down the road. So we have to clean the sword before we put it away. And we begin that cleaning process with our third waza, Chiburui, which means almost literally life essence flicking in Japanese. It's done a number of different ways in different schools, but in the school I've studied, it's a simple snap to the arm, snap to the right with the right arm, thus. And the worst of the muck goes all over you. It doesn't go all over me. There's still a lot of mess on the sword, but what you would then do is pull out a cloth. And you would clean that mess off. You would clean that blade as thoroughly as possible before you put it back inside the scabbard. Because otherwise you're going to do a lot of damage to the blade and a lot of damage to the scabbard. So clean your sword. You don't usually refer to that in kata. You just take the first part of it, shiburi, and that's saying, right, now we clean the sword. And so finally we come to the fourth and final waza, noto, putting the sword away. So, we've talked about the razor sharp edge. You'll probably have worked out for yourself it has a pin sharp point. So do you really want to put this sword away by going because you'll stick it through your hand sooner or later. The safest way is to put the sword away without looking down, which sounds terrifying, but we drew the sword without looking down, so there's no real reason why we shouldn't put it away without looking down, so long as we observe some simple safety precautions. We have to also remember there may still be attackers out there. The moment your focus goes down here, that's the moment they'll choose to attack, and you may not be ready. So, the big safety consideration here again is the blunt back of the sword. That cannot hurt us. So what we do is, after Chiburui, we seize the scabbard. But this time only with these 3 fingers, because these two, the thumb and forefinger, are going to act as a channel and a pad to run the sword along until the point drops into the mouth of the scabbard. So, seize hold. Your practice and your instinct will make all of us do this slightly differently. But turn the scabbard and flip the sword onto its back. Lay the sword on your fingers and then put the sword away by. When we drew it, it was push-pull. When we put it away, it's pull and push till the point drops neatly into the scabbard. Then, if you're all lined up correctly, you should be able to slide the 2 of them together without damaging the scabbard. And then you can re-engage the habaki seal as you step up with your left leg. You give the sword a little salute with your fist. Nukitsuki, moving into Kiriroshi. Cover, Chiburui, Noto, 2 steps back, eyes on your opponent, rest of the steps back, alert for other opponents, relax. So,